There is a version of calm that looks like power, walks like power, gets treated like power by everyone in the room, and it is slowly killing the person who wears it. In 2026, Ayanokoji's dangerous calm is the most aspirational psychological state among an entire generation. The stillness, the unreadability, the ability to sit inside any crisis without flinching, without showing a single crack. Young people are studying it like a blueprint, trying to reverse engineer it from edit videos and character analysis threads, building their entire social identity around projecting it. Here's what none of those videos tell you. That calm has an origin story, and the origin story is not discipline. It's not mastery. It's not some elite psychological state achieved through rigorous self-development. It's a wound, a very old, very deep wound that learned to look presentable. Once you understand the actual science behind it, you will never look at that archetype the same way again. Let's get into it. The White Room. For those who haven't watched the show, it's the facility where Ayanokoji was raised. No parental warmth, no emotional connection, no comfort when distressed, just performance metrics, relentless pressure, and the complete systematic elimination of anything resembling human attachment. The show presents this as the crucible that forged a perfect mind. Real developmental psychology tells a completely different story. When a child reaches out for comfort repeatedly and nothing comes back, the brain doesn't simply accept the absence, it adapts around it. It builds what psychologists call deactivating strategies, active subconscious processes that learn to switch the attachment system entirely off, because engaging it only produces pain with no reward. The child stops seeking comfort, stops expressing distress, learns to treat emotional need as a structural liability, builds an intense, compulsive self-reliance that looks, from the outside, like extraordinary independence. This is insecure, avoidant attachment, and it is not a superpower. It is the nervous system's emergency protocol, a survival architecture built for an environment that failed to provide what every developing human brain biologically requires. Ayanokoji's calm isn't built on discipline. It's built on a deactivated attachment system, doing exactly what it was designed to do, keep him functional in an environment where emotional engagement would only produce suffering. The tragedy of the character is right there in the origin story. He isn't powerful because of the White Room. He's operational despite it. Those are completely different things, and the fan base almost universally misses that distinction entirely. So, what is his calm actually doing, mechanically, when you look at the cognitive science? Two completely different psychological processes can produce what looks like calm from the outside. They have opposite effects on everything that actually matters. The first, cognitive reappraisal. The brain reframes the meaning of a stressful situation before the emotional response is fully generated, before the amygdala fires at full intensity, before cortisol spikes, before the physiological cascade is already underway. The person changes how the situation is interpreted at the source, not through denial, but through genuine reevaluation. This is data. This is a problem with components. This doesn't require an emergency response. When this works, the calm it produces is real. Nervous system actually regulated, heart rate stable, cognitive resources fully available. The person can think clearly, read the room with precision, respond with genuine sharpness. No performance required. No internal war happening underneath. Just a regulated mind operating at full capacity. The second, expressive suppression. The emotional response is fully generated. Amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, heart rate elevates. The physiological stress cascade is completely live, and then the person consciously holds all of it back, freezes the face, flattens the voice, directs every available unit of cognitive bandwidth toward making sure none of the internal chaos leaks outward. From the outside, in a single moment, these two things look identical. Both people appear calm, but underneath, they are completely different machines running at completely different costs. The suppressor is running a massive background process that consumes working memory, degrades executive function, and leaves significantly fewer cognitive resources available for actual strategic thinking. Research is consistent on this. Expressive suppression actively impairs memory and decision-making while it's happening. The person looks unbothered. Their brain is burning through processing capacity just to maintain the appearance, which means less is available for reading the room, anticipating responses, making the precise decisions that the whole performance was supposed to demonstrate. And then there's the tell that unravels everything, operating completely below conscious awareness. Micro-expressions, involuntary facial movements lasting fractions of a second, leaking genuine emotional states despite every conscious effort to suppress them. Other people's nervous systems pick these up automatically, not consciously, subconsciously, producing a vague instinctive sense that something is off, that the calm isn't real, that the gap between what's being shown and what's actually happening underneath is larger than it should be. Suppression doesn't just fail to build the aura, it actively signals inauthenticity to everyone perceptive enough to catch it. And the cruel irony is that the person running on suppression can't detect this feedback, because all of their cognitive attention is directed inward at managing the performance, rather than outward at reading the room they're trying to control. Now bring this into 2026, and the picture gets significantly darker. In 2026, performing emotional detachment has become a primary form of social currency across American youth culture. Deliberately delayed replies, systematic downplaying of enthusiasm, sarcasm loaded into every exchange so nothing ever has to be genuinely meant, an entire aesthetic organized around one core signal: I cannot be touched by this. And the reason it's spreading isn't confidence, it's risk calculation. A 2022 study confirmed that young adults are systematically suppressing their emotional displays online, consciously managing perception. By 2025, researchers found that teenagers were no longer experiencing this as a personal preference. It had become a mandatory coping mechanism just to survive daily social scrutiny. Every unguarded moment is a potential screenshot. Every sincere expression of caring is one clip away from becoming content. The clinical term for what people are avoiding is vulnerability hangover, the prolonged social anxiety that follows any moment of public emotional exposure. The math makes a cold kind of sense. When the cost of genuine vulnerability is high and the probability of it being received safely is low, detachment becomes the dominant strategy. Not because it feels good, because the alternative has been punished enough times that the nervous system treats it as genuinely dangerous. This same logic is destroying modern dating in 2026. The unspoken rule: whoever shows the least investment holds the power. Both sides perform indifference simultaneously. Both wait for the other to move first. Both protect themselves so completely from the possibility of caring more than the other person that nothing real ever forms. The connection dies in that indefinite, non-committed limbo that an entire generation now has a specific name for: the failed talking stage. Not because neither person cared, because both of them did, and neither would be the first to admit it. The protection worked perfectly and cost them exactly what they were protecting. But here's what the math of detachment never accounts for: the bill that doesn't arrive until much later. Suppression doesn't neutralize the internal state, it only hides it. Research on avoidant individuals under social stress shows something that should genuinely unsettle people. When measured physiologically, cortisol, heart rate, skin conductance, their bodies show the same stress response as anyone else's, sometimes higher. They're not actually calm. They've lost the ability to detect their own distress signals. The body is still keeping the score. The mind has just been trained to stop reading the scoreboard. This is the somatic disconnect, and tracked over time, it produces something that looks nothing like the powerful archetype people were trying to build. It produces elevated rates of clinical depression, chronic anxiety, somatic illness, and a specific kind of loneliness that is almost impossible to describe, because the entire performance was constructed to make it invisible to everyone, including the person experiencing it. And in 2026, this pattern is being installed earlier than ever before, because the same burnout culture producing emotionally detached adults is producing emotionally unavailable parents. Exhausted caregivers, stretched thin by economic pressure and chronic stress, withdrawing from their children without intending to. Speaking less, minimizing physical affection, making caregiving feel like obligation rather than connection. The child has no framework to interpret this as, my parent is struggling. The conclusion that forms is far more personal. My emotional needs are a burden, so they get suppressed. The unbothered persona doesn't start on TikTok. It starts in a bedroom where nobody came when it mattered. The nonchalance epidemic is, in a very real sense, a generational inheritance, a coping strategy passed down not through conversation, but through absence. The national numbers in 2026 make this concrete. Around 40% of American students report persistent sadness or hopelessness. 1 in 5 has seriously considered suicide. Close to 1 in 10 has attempted it. In a hallway, in a comment section, in a group chat, these people look completely fine. unbothered, in control, the mask performing exactly as designed, right up until it catastrophically stops working. And when it stops, there's nothing underneath it that was ever built to hold the weight. This is what Ayanokoji's dangerous calm looks like when you follow it all the way to its real-world conclusion. Not a brilliant strategist operating at peak human capacity, a person who has successfully disabled their own early warning system and doesn't know it. So where does this leave someone who actually wants genuine composure, not the performance, the real version? The answer runs in the opposite direction from everything the nonchalance trend is selling. Real composure isn't built by showing less, it's built by processing earlier and more precisely, so there's genuinely less to suppress in the first place. This starts with emotional differentiation, the ability to identify, with real granularity, what's actually happening in a difficult moment. One of the primary pathways to emotional dysregulation is what clinicians call bodily unawareness. When all distress blurs into one vague, overwhelming signal, the only available response is total shutdown. But when you can label the specific state precisely, I'm experiencing anticipatory anxiety about an outcome I can't control, rather than I feel off, the processing moves from the reactive amygdala to the analytical prefrontal cortex. The intensity drops. The overwhelm clears. Cognitive space opens for actual strategic thought rather than just survival. That shift, from reactive to analytical, is the closest real-world equivalent to what Ayanokoji does in the fiction. But the mechanism isn't emptiness, it's precision. The fan base misreads the output as an absence of input. They see the stillness and conclude nothing is underneath it. But stillness born from genuine processing is completely different from stillness born from shutdown. One is a skill, the other is damage. And in 2026, an enormous amount of content is being produced that treats them as interchangeable. And then there's the piece that contradicts every lone wolf fantasy this character has ever inspired. In 2026, the most genuinely composed, strategically effective people are not the most isolated ones. The longitudinal data on this is not subtle. The highest levels of real resilience are found in securely attached individuals. People who have stable, trust-based connections and don't run a constant background defensive process through every social interaction. That background process, scanning for rejection, managing distance, deciding in real time how much to reveal before pulling back, is itself the source of the internal noise that then has to be suppressed. Remove the defensive process, and the suppression becomes unnecessary. The calm that remains is real, available, and costs nothing to maintain. That version is worth building, and it is built through the opposite of isolation, through connections that prove to the nervous system, over time, that vulnerability doesn't always result in abandonment. Ayanokoji is compelling because he represents an extreme that real humans can't and shouldn't reach. His calm is a monument to absolute self-defense, and monuments are cold, still, and completely uninhabited. Nobody lives inside a monument. Nobody grieves inside one, or laughs inside one, or feels anything real inside one. That's what makes them impressive from a distance and completely empty up close. The real goal was never to become a monument. It was to become someone who can stay steady in the storm because the internal work has been done, not because the capacity to feel the storm has been permanently disabled. So here's where this leaves you in 2026. You now understand the complete psychology behind the dangerous calm, where it comes from developmentally, what it's doing cognitively at every moment of social pressure, what it costs physiologically over time, and why the version being built online is the expensive counterfeit rather than the real thing. Which brings the obvious next question. If genuine composure is built on emotional precision and real connection rather than suppression and isolation, what does actually building it look like for someone whose avoidant patterns are already deep enough to feel like a personality? That's exactly what the next video on your screen breaks down. The specific, research-backed steps for rebuilding real emotional regulation when you've been going in the opposite direction long enough that turning around feels impossible. Click that next, because the calm worth having isn't built by feeling less. It's built by finally stopping the war you've been quietly fighting with yourself.